And we're live.
Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, all. Thank you for joining me today. Today, we are coming to you live from YouTube and Facebook. Yes, all the kinks have been worked out. So now we'll be coming to you live from Facebook and YouTube. Tonight's discussion, as you guys know, I have often said and will continue to say that my lives, my Let's Talk forum, my Let's Talk platform is all about what you want to talk about, what's on your mind, discussions that you want to have. Some of them are going to be very tough. I think tonight is one of those discussions that's going to be really sensitive, but it's a very necessary and needed discussion to have. The topic of discussion is fathers by name only. Now, I have to start off tonight by saying this. This is not about bashing men or bashing fathers. That's not what this discussion is about. It's a very specific discussion with a very specific question. And I'm going to repeat the question several times throughout the evening because I really want people to chime in and give me their thoughts, their answers about the question. The question is this: when is it, or is it ever okay, to remove a father from his children's lives? Let that question ponder and sit with you for a while. Ponder over that and let that sit with you for a while. Now, this particular topic is extremely sensitive and personal for me. Let me tell you why. My mother, my sister, myself, and my niece were all single mothers. My mother and my sister and my niece didn't start off as single parents, but ended up so. I started off as a single parent. The father of my daughter had already returned back to his hometown, his home country, when I learned I was pregnant. So I've always been a single mother. It's always been me and my daughter. My mother and my niece were married to the father of their children. That marriage fell apart and they went their separate ways. My mom, when my dad left, my mom nor myself ever saw him again. He was out of sight, out of mind. He was just gone. In my niece's case, her father, the children of her father are still around. He's still around, and he obviously has interaction with the kids. And so that's good, but still very painful to go through, as most of you know who've been through it. My sister was never married to the children of her father, but they have a really good relationship, and even a better one now. It was really, really hard in the beginning because the kids were young. He too left, started a new family. But I'm happy to say that at least he's in his kids' life. They're all adults now, anyways, but he's around and him and my sister get along well. I say all this to give you a bit of context of what it's like being a single mother and the different ways we become single mothers. One of these days, I'm going to have a discussion about married women who are single parents. That's a whole nother discussion. But there's so many different ways that we become single parents, and they look differently for different people. There's different dynamics in that single parenthood. So now the question becomes, you're a single parent, or you're co-parenting with the father of your children, and he's not stepping up to the plate. He's not doing what he's supposed to do as a parent. You feel like you're really carrying the bag all by yourself. For me, watching my daughter grow up without a father, even though I surrounded her with aunties and uncles and love, and she has that love and that support, and that's great. But I do see the effect it has on her not having a father. She makes comments every now and again. I feel the hurt for her that he's not around, and what that must be like for her. I remember myself, I was close to my father before he left. I was 6 when I went to school one day and I came back and he was no longer there, never to be seen again. So I see the hurt, I know the feeling. But what happens when the father is there and you're co-parenting with this father, but he's there in name only? What I like to call, he punches the clock. He comes in, he punches the time clock, he does his time, and then he leaves. There's no real interaction, there's no engagement, there's no fatherly, father and child time. It's just, okay, I'm here. And it looks like or appears like he can't wait to walk out the front door. It's a struggle getting anything from him. You tell him how his behavior is affecting the kids, doesn't seem to care. You offer suggestions, doesn't listen. It's all about him, how he wants to do it, and you're left holding the bag, being mother and father to the kids. And then you get to the point where you say to yourself, just better off I do it on my own. Isn't it better that I just say, you know what, forget it. We don't need you to come around. We don't need you to be a part-time dad. So just go. We've got this from here. We'll take it. We're fine. Is that okay? What do you think about that? I have my thoughts on that, and I'm going to reserve what I'm thinking. I'm not going to say anything for now because I really want to hear what you have to say about that. What you think about that? What do you think about that? I see some comments coming in. I'm going to see if I can see them from here. Who was that first person?
Tonya Rose said, hey, this.
So that very first person is my lovely sister that we all know as Rose, the one I was referring to earlier. But I just want to hear what everybody has to say about that. Hey, sis. I just want to know, is there ever a time? Now, of course, there are those situations where the father will absolutely, definitely have to be removed. And we won't have to do anything about it. The law will. And that's those cases where there is physical or sexual abuse, that there's abandonment. So we're not talking about those cases here because that's an automatic. That does not need to be discussed. We're really talking about fathers who show up in a way that they think is good enough. They think that what they're doing, however they're doing it, is okay. It's good enough. We shouldn't complain. Do we have the right to say to them, it's not enough? And if you're not going to do more and be more and show up more, then just don't bother coming at all. Do we as mothers have that right? And do we call it being protective, watching out for our children? I don't know. I have my thoughts, but I'm going to reserve my comments, how I feel about it, until the end of the show, until I get everybody else's comments in. So I'm just waiting for you all to come in with your comments and see. Yes, domestic abuse as well. All the stuff that clearly, legally, the law will take care of. We're not talking about that. We're really talking about, as a parent, do you have that right to say, he is not stepping up to the plate? I'm going to remove the kids from his life. I'm going to tell him not to bother coming around. I've got this from here. One of the comments that I received earlier, one of the questions that somebody wanted me to ask was, whose best interest should be considered when deciding whether or not a dysfunctional parent should be included in a child's life? It's one of the questions to add to that. Whose best interest should be considered? The children, the father, the mother? Whose best interest should be considered? I see another comments come in. Let me take a look at that comment. It says, I told my oldest, we really can't say that, see that from that far. So give me a second, ladies.
Sharon said, I told my oldest dad, I told my eldest dad, it's either he's there, or I told my eldest dad, either he's there, he's not, or he chooses he's not, as he would pass by or promise, but promised to, but never came, as that was affecting my son more, just sitting at the window watching for him.
Yeah, that reminds me again of my niece and nephew. So Sharon says that she told the father of her oldest child, either he's there or he's not there, but he can't be in and out. And she was tired, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't see the comments from this far, but she was tired of watching her child sitting at the window waiting for him to come, whether he was going to come or not. My niece says the children, we should consider the children.
Tanya says, going to play devil advocate, there are single dads as well.
Agreed. I actually was going to catch myself on that. Thanks, Rose. I was going to catch myself. I kept saying the father, but you're right, Rose. You're 100% right. There are single fathers out there as well. I actually know a couple. And the argument goes both ways. When is it okay to tell the mother, don't bother, don't show up? Back to Sharon's comment about that she told the father of her eldest child is either you're in or you're out, which is exactly what we're talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about. Do we have that right to do that? Or the mere fact that they show up, part-time it may be, is that okay? Will that suffice for the kids? Is it better for the kids to have them there that little bit of time or not at all? Who gets to decide that? Lana says, if your child is consistently being disappointed or emotionally triggered, then I think it's a conversation that should be had regarding advocating for your child's mental and emotional health. Agreed, 100%. The friend that started this discussion, her and I asked her a lot of those questions. Have you spoken to the father and explained to him how this affects the kids? Have you told him that he needs to do better? Have you? And she said she has had those conversations with him, and it appears to fall on deaf ears. So what do you do then? I do, Rose. I know exactly what it was like for my niece and my nephew. And I know what it's like for my daughter. I watched it all. And that's why I said this particular topic is extremely sensitive and personal to me and for me. It speaks of my entire family dynamic, honestly speaking. And that's why I'm holding back my comments until the end. So in cases that like Lana's referring to or Sharon referred to earlier, do we have that right? As parents, whether it's a mother protecting their children or a father protecting the children from the mother, do we have that right to say, that's it, no more, I don't want you around, I'm going to do this by myself? And if we take that position, how do you explain that to the children? What do you say to the children? Are we right to do that? Is there ever a time when that's okay? That's what I really need to know. Bring in all your comments. Let me know. I know this is a tough one. This is a real tough one.
So Tanya.
Yeah, I saw that one. She's talking about my niece and my nephew, and I know she's talking about. I've been there. I watched it. Another thing that parents have to understand too, whether it's mothers walking away from their children, and mothers do that too, or fathers walking away. I don't know if they don't give enough consideration for the effect them leaving is going to have on their kids. That's why this particular question is a tough one. Because when the parent does leave, regardless of how they leave, be it on their own or they're forced to leave by the other parents, by the law, whatever the case may be, the kids ultimately suffer. Because especially with the young ones, they don't know about all this stuff, and frankly, they don't care. They know they see daddy and that's daddy, or they see mommy and that's mommy, and that's good enough for them. As they get older, that's when it starts becoming noticeable and recognizable to them. Daddy was supposed to come, and he's not here. I know the story of my nephew waiting for his dad to show up, and him never coming. You can call them as many times, leave the door open, and some of them I can't see that, don't take advantage of it. If you want to just push that closer a bit, Shireen?
Sure.
Thanks, dear. There we go. You can tell them as many times, leave the door open, and some of them, what's that word after some of them?
Some of them, moms/dads, don't take advantage of it to meet you halfway. Awesome topic tonight.
It's very true. You can try all the compromising in the world. Okay, every Saturday. Okay, every other Saturday. Okay, twice a month on Saturday. You know, whatever the compromise is, what do you do when you compromise? You bend over backwards. You try to come to a reasonable conclusion and nothing works. Is it okay then to say, yeah, okay, I'm done. You need to go. Or do you keep fighting? What clarifies are we considering when we tracking the parents' rights? Good question. A really good question. I don't know. I don't know if it's about the parents' rights. What about the kids? It's the kids that get left behind, and the parent that's left behind answering questions from the kids. For me, it's watching the effect that has on kids that become adults. You know, these kids grow up, and that hurt, that disappointment, that loss, because it's a loss to them, grows with them. You also have to consider the legal route. Well, yeah, there is that legal route, right? But even if you go the legal route and the judge says, I'm giving full sole custody to the mother or to the father, there's still that loss for the children. And the parent that's left behind holding the bag, you have to consider that when you choose to go the legal route. This is a really tough one. Sharon says, I'm going to see if I can read that from here. It's a little bit far. Well, for me, he made the choice not to come. I never said anything negative about his dad to him, and he grew to understand. He thanked God. Can you push that a little bit closer? Sorry.
Yeah, and had a great step.
Thank God he had a great stepdad.
That took him everywhere.
That took him everywhere.
My son is a well-rounded. My son is a well-rounded dad now, and he has a sort of relationship with his dad, but he has to be the one reaching out.
Okay, wow.
You should open your phone so you
So
can see
thank
that.
God he had a stepdad that stepped in. And he, as Sharon says, is now a well-rounded dad himself that does now have a relationship with his dad, but he has to be the one reaching out. Okay, so we have these kids that are kids. They're young. They're very young. They're too young to understand what's going on. They're too young to care about what dad did or dad didn't do, or what mom did or what mom didn't do. All they know is dad here, is mom here, is mom coming, is dad coming. These kids grow up to become teenagers. And their other friends have both parents in the household, and they're missing a parent. These teenagers then grow up and become adults. And for a lot of them, the hurt, the pain, the anguish follows them from childhood to teen, to preteen, to teen, into adulthood. And sometimes, sadly, they repeat the cycle. That's why this question is such a difficult one for me. When is it ever, or is it ever, a good time, the right time to say, you're not stepping up to the plate, you're not holding your weight, be gone. I'll do this from here. We are always facing generational curses in a spiritual way. Unfortunately, that's true. Until somebody breaks it. You don't have to recycle the curse. You don't have to. I'm going to see if I can get into my Facebook because I'm having a very difficult time seeing the screen. So give me 1 second, those that are watching. Okay, here we go. Okay. I think this is the most recent one. I have a friend who did give the dad multiple opportunities to be a father to his child, but then ultimately she had to go through the legal system to receive the support that was needed. My friend's son is now 12 years old and doing well. Her son is so loving, so smart, surrounded by other great male figures in his life. Thank God for that. That does happen sometimes, and I know I made it a point to surround my daughter with a lot of loving influences. She has my sister, the one that's making a lot of the comments on there right now, who she calls Other Mommy. She's almost 30. She still calls her Other Mommy. She has a wealth of aunties and uncles, and I thank God for that. But you still see the loneliness and the sadness in her sometimes at not having her father. You still see that, and she's surrounded by love. I call her one of the most wealthiest child I know because of how loved she is. But not everybody is that blessed, Lana, to have that, to grow up well-rounded and not have the absentee parent affect their lives. A lot of them carry it with them for life. They don't know how to let go of that hurt and that anger and that disappointment. It's hard for them to let go of. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. For me, I think it affected me in the way where, especially with men, that if I thought you were thinking of leaving me, I was gone. I always felt, no matter what relationship that I was in, that it wasn't going to last long, that they were never fully in, they were never fully committed. And so I think what I did was I overcompensated. Every relationship that I was in, I dove in both feet, hard. I was telling a friend the other day that when I was dating a guy, when I met a guy, I instantly became an expert in him. I got my PhD, my master's. I just knew everything about him, his likes, his dislikes. And I think I was overcompensating because I expected him to leave. He's not going to stay. Why would he? They don't stay. So those are some of the effects I think it had on me when my father just disappeared. Again, never to be seen again. It's hard on the kids, and that's why this question is so important. Do we have the right to say, you're not good enough, you're not carrying your weight, you're dysfunctional, you're not adding value to the kids' lives, you're complicating mine, you're making things more difficult for me. I might as well do this on my own. Do we have that right? I think another comment just came in. I don't know. Because we have to grieve the loss of the relationship for yourself. Oh my gosh. That's such a good point, Rose. That's a good one, Rose. That's a good one. In addition to picking up the pieces, when that parent leaves, and you now have to be mother and father and comfort the child, you yourself, as the adult, you're grieving the loss of your relationship. But you don't have the time to fall apart and sleep all day and eat ice cream in bed because you're grieving your loss. You got to take care of your kids. It's a double-edged sword. That's such a good point that you have to consider as well. Now, in some cases, where you're co-parenting, that may not be the issue because you've already broken up and everybody's gone their own way. You're just supposed to be co-parenting with the other parent. But in a situation where you're in a full-fledged relationship, which is the case of another person that I know, been married for, I think, 15, 20 years, and the husband's just gone. He's just gone, apparently living with the next girl, and left her with 3 kids on her own. Fend for yourself. How do you pick up the pieces of that broken life? How do you heal yourself? How do you grieve and take care of the kids and console them and comfort them? Very, 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 very difficult questions. And we still don't have a clear-cut answer. Is it okay? Actually, I think now that I look at the time, we've got about 15 minutes left. It's time everybody answers that question. So here we go. For those that are on, let's answer that question. Is it ever a good time? Is it okay to get to that point where you say to the father or the mother, I don't want you coming around anymore. Don't come back, don't call, don't come and visit. I don't want you to have any contact with the kids. I've given you X amount of chances, and clearly you are not going to do what needs to be done. Is that okay? Yes or no? Is there a clear-cut answer? I don't know, Lana. I honestly don't know if there's a clear-cut yes or no answer. I don't know. I don't know. We have to go back to the question that my friend asked. Whose best interest should we consider? Clearly, I think the answer there obviously is the children. That's the best interest, is the children. But are we doing what is in the best interest of the children? By saying, don't don't come back. What are the pros and cons of saying don't come back or allowing the status quo to continue? Latifah says it depends. Rose says, let me see. Let me go back to Facebook. It's easier to read that there. I don't know, guys. I don't know. Tough one. Real tough one. At the end. Rose says, first you want to
Break windows.
yes.
Or get into a physical situation.
Yeah, that sounds like you.
And then God steps in and takes control.
That sounds like my sister. And then Sharon says,
I feel you should probably repeat it for the people that are watching.
so Rose says, first you want to break windows or get into a physical altercation situation. And then thank God that God steps in the way and takes control. Thank God for that. Sharon says, I feel that there are times when it's okay if you
see how it's affecting your child, and if he really wants to be there, he'll fight tooth and nail to be there.
Sharon says it really depends on how it's affecting your child. And if you see how it's affecting your child, and if that other parent really wants to be there, they will fight tooth and nail. And I see what she's saying. If that other parent says, oh, well, wait a second, I can't come back. And once they see how serious you are, it may make them change. Latifah says, I could have done that, but I tried to ask him regarding my expectations.
Regarding parent. I try to talk to him regarding my expectations.
I try to talk to him regarding my expectations regarding parenting. And I have the comment at the bottom that says, trust your kids.
And have an open conversation. Kids are not blind.
Trust your kids and have an open conversation. Kids are not blind. Andrea says, as you said, it's about the child, not about yourself and how you feel.
Sharon says she totally agrees.
And Rose says, Sharon, I totally agree. Whew. I have to be honest, for the first time since I started doing my lives, I was nervous about today's. It's just such a hot topic, I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. I think Tifa was right when she said it depends. I think that's probably the closest, most accurate answer. It depends. I think it depends on a lot of factors. I think to answer the question now, my answer is, well, first of all, I didn't have that option to say to him, go, don't come back. He was gone anyways. I had my daughter and he was gone. If I was in a scenario like what my friend told me or another friend that I heard about, would I say to him, don't come back? I honestly think it depends on how it was affecting my child. If when he came and visited for however long he did and left and it was impacting my child negatively, I would have to do something about it. I would have to do something drastic about it. And that drastic thing might well just be saying, yeah, you can't come back. This is serving her no good at all. But if he came by every Saturday for a couple of hours and sat on his phone the whole time, but she was just so happy to have daddy in the room, I think I might let it continue. Now, if I was to stop it, it would be, if I want to be honest, it would be because of how it made me feel. I would be the one upset that he's coming, he's not engaging with her, he's on his phone, he's talking to his friend, he's planning where he's going to go next, like why bother come? Like you're not doing anything, but she's happy just because he's there. So if I was to do and or say anything about it, it would be probably because of how it made me feel. That's probably as honest as I can be. Knowing you will for sure of your children. You know, sure what?
Knowing you will for sure because of your children.
Yeah. This topic needs a part 2. Here we go again. Don't come back will destroy my, don't come back will destroy my kids. I really believe that there are some dynamics where if you say to the father, do not come back, because you, the mother, or you, the father, say to the mother, don't come back because you feel that that parent is not holding their weight, and you're not looking to see the effect on your children when that parent does come. And you say, because you've decided, you are judge, jury, and executioner, that he shouldn't come back. Are you prepared to handle the kids after that? The questions, the sadness, the missing him? Oh, and God forbid when they grow up older and they find out the reason why dad disappeared all of a sudden was because you told him to?
Mm.
Woo! Knowing what is best for your child and being assertive with what your child needs is important. Very correct, Lana. There are always ways to compromise so that everyone wins. Agreed, Andrea. But we are not friends. I don't ever say hi to him. That's from Latifa. And again, see, to Tifa's points, good point, Andrea, good point, Lana, good point, Rose. Stephanie, yeah, there's always room for a part two. But to Tifa's point, but we are not friends. That's exactly what I was just saying. If this boils down to me telling him not to come around because I feel like he's not holding his weight, I feel like he's disappointing my child, but not seeing disappointment on my child because she just cares that he's there, then why am I really doing this? Am I doing it for the best interest of the child or because I'm pissed off? You gotta check yourself on that. Boundaries. At the end of the day, you do have to be selfish and think of yourself as well. Because the kids will still have their absent parent on a pedestal. Yeah, that's a tough one too. There's not an easy answer to this question, guys. There isn't. You can either come off being the worst parent ever in the eyes of your children, or a good parent for being protective. But this all boils down to knowing your children, knowing what's right for your children. Because this can go bad in a New York minute. I don't know. I don't have the answer. Yeah, I just said that to you. I wasn't even looking at your comment. I said there is no right answer. Nikki says this issue is. I'm sorry, I can't see it from there. I'm going to try to see if I can pull it up on my phone, or if I can get the TV screen pulled a little bit further to me. Nikki's comments.
This issue is age sensitive. Protect the kids when they are young.
Mm-hmm.
By the time they are 12, they can be open to the broken parent and have a stable mind and sense of self. This way they don't internalize why that parent isn't consistent. Latifa said there is no right answer. Mm-hmm. Tanya said there is no right answer.
Good point, Nikki, and thanks for bringing that up and thanks for reminding me about that because I wanted to mention that. Nikki's comment, and I'm just going to paraphrase, I'm not reading the whole thing because I can't see from here, but Nikki's comment is that it's age sensitive, and that's very true. And I kind of touched on it in the beginning, that when they're younger, like really, really young, then either way, it's hard to answer. But when they're younger, we can make the decisions for them in terms of what's better. But never underestimate the mind of a child. Just because they're younger doesn't mean that they don't have that emotional attachment to that parent. And if we decide, because they're 2 years old, that we're going to remove that parent and it won't affect them that much, we're wrong. It still can. But I can understand where Nikki's coming from in the sense that it may be easier for us to make that decision when they're younger. Maybe. When they're older, when they get to that, 8, 10, 12 age, and of course older than that, then they can decide. But when they're younger, I think a lot of this is focused on when they're younger. We're not talking about a teenager or an adult. They can definitely decide if they want to continue having a relationship with their parent. We're talking about when they're 2, 4, and 6 years old. We have to decide what's best for them. How do we do that in this scenario? Yeah. Sharon agrees with Nikki. Latifa disagrees. I'd love to know what it is you disagree about, Latifa. I don't know. I usually have a lot to say about everything. I usually have a word of wisdom to say about everything. This one is a tough one. I knew it was coming in. As I said before, it was the most nervous I've been since doing my lives, because I knew that there's no clear-cut answer. You can't assume that every child bonds with an absent parent. There is a huge spectrum when it comes to the way children are affected. Oh yeah. That's what makes this question hard to answer. Every child is different. That's why we said not too long ago, you have this all starts with knowing your children. You have to know your children. You have to see the effect it has when that parent comes, when that parent leaves, when that parent doesn't come, when that parent disappoints them. How does it affect them? And I think that will help you decide on how to deal with this. Yeah, you're gonna need lots of prayers, Rose. We're gonna need lots of prayers. My son remembers, can you read Sharon's comments, please?
Sure. My son remembers waiting on him, dressed, and he's a no-show. So they will know regardless of how small they are.
That's the heartbreaking one. Sharon says her son remembers being dressed and waiting on him, and he doesn't show up. If my nephew was here, he'd tell you a couple of stories like that, very similar stories like that as well. Yeah, this is a hard one. It's a hard one, and it's a sad one, and there's no clear-cut, easy answer. There's not a one-size-fits-all answer. It really is. If you're facing this dynamic, you have to do the pros and the cons. You literally have to weigh the pros and the cons. What's in the best interest for your child at that time in their life? And please really examine your heart and be honest about why you're making that decision. Whatever decision you decide to make, especially if the decision is to cut that parent out of the child's life, please be honest about why you're doing that. Don't let it be about you. Let it be about the best interest of the child or children. Yeah, Nikki, that doesn't always work to say don't tell the children when the parent's coming, especially if there's a routine or a schedule where the parent's supposed to be coming every other Saturday or every Saturday. Like for example, my niece who's on here, her kids, my great niece and my great nephew, they know the schedule. They know exactly when they're going to their dad's. So if he was to pull a disappearing act, that would be hugely disappointing because they know when they're supposed to go. So I don't know. Keep the comments coming. Comments coming. I knew this was going to be a good discussion. I also knew we weren't going to walk away with a clear-cut answer. If somebody was watching and hoping to get an answer to that question, a bona fide answer, sorry if we disappointed you. But when you're dealing with human emotions and feelings, especially children, there is no clear-cut answer. There just isn't. It really boils down to what is in the best interest of the child. Your child. Not the neighbor's child, your sister's child, your child. Not, oh, my friend's husband did such and such to the kids. We're not talking about that. We're talking about your child. The dynamics of your children, how it's going to affect them, what you see them go through when he comes and goes or when she comes and goes. That's what we're referring to here. This is such a heartbreaking scenario and also a chance to gather perspective for everyone facing a situation of this magnitude, especially involving a child's well-being. Well said, Lana. Kids won't feel a way about one missed visit. If it's Oh, absolutely. No, if it's one missed visit, and you can say, especially if it's not in the parents' if the parent doesn't regularly miss visits. Like if the parent is always there, and they miss one visit, and there's a really good reason, car broke down, something happened. We're not talking about one missed visit. Oh, no. That's on the parent left behind to say, oh, daddy was on his way, but he couldn't make it because he's going to make it up to you next week. Oh, yeah, that's totally understandable, Nikki. We're talking about the ones who leave the kids at the window, week in and week out, weekend in and weekend out. That's what we're referring to. If it's a routine, then that is something that needs to be addressed, absolutely. By the time it's a routine, it is up to the parent to decide what is the best situation to, exactly, agreed.
You should read it out just for
Yeah, you get tired of making excuses. Yes, Sharon, you do get tired of making excuses. Nikki, I appreciate your thoughts, and your thoughts are right. You know, if it's just a one-time thing, that's fine. If it's a routine, then it needs to be addressed. But then again, as we were saying earlier, what happens when you do address it and it falls on deaf ears? Then what do you do? Like, you know, the father goes home or the mother goes home and you call them and say, listen, this is really affecting the kids. You've got to make a change here. You got to do better. And it's the same old. At what point do you say, okay, enough is enough? Yeah, Sharon says you get tired of making excuses. Nikki says those ones need to go. And my niece says court. Just court. Some mothers block the father from the child because he is in a new relationship. Very true, Stephanie. And that's why I said you need to examine your heart when you make that decision, especially if the decision is to block him from his children. Please make sure you're doing it for the right reason. Please make sure you're doing it for the best interest of the children and not because you're vexed that you hear that he's dating somebody else. Please, I'm begging you out there. This is about the kids, 100% about the children, not about your feelings. You're grown, you can deal with your feelings. We're trying to protect our children. Hold them accountable in every way you can. Deaf ears equal immaturity, absolutely. Keep a diary of the situation. This might also help when having a tracking method and evaluating the best interest of the child. It works both ways. Well, I'm so sorry to end it here because I feel like there's a lot more to discuss. So if I find that there's more comments coming in throughout the night, then we'll do a part 2. The next live will be a continuation of this one to get people to get more comments out. It also gives you a time to ponder a little bit more. This is a tough one. You can't just sit back and say yes, no. This is a real thought-provoking question. Sharon says, yes, your heart has to be in the right place. I never took him to court. I just let him be. Rose says, but when they are grown, the is some what? Read that comment from Rose.
But when they are grown, I think there is some damages that is done.
That's true. There's some damage that there is some damage that needs to be done. That I know, and I know Rose is my sister, so I know what she's talking about. I witness it with my niece, my nephew, and my daughter. There is, but at a certain point too, the older they get, they have to kind of start watching out for themselves now. But I know what you're talking about, Rose. Andrea says,
these men are so broken. We can't really expect them to be good fathers.
Andrea says these men are really broken. We can't really expect them to be good fathers when they come from broken homes themselves, where they had no father in the homes. In his model, what good fathering feels like. Oh, Andrea, now isn't that a mouthful? And that's probably part 2, at least, Stephanie. That's probably where this discussion should have started, and maybe the part 2 should start there. Hurting people hurt other people. It is something that I was told years ago when a friend and I got into a disagreement and someone said to me, she's not usually like that. Hurting people hurt other people. A lot of these men And if you want to take it culturally, a lot of Black men don't have a good example in the home of what a good father looks like. They just don't. So they repeat what they know. And unfortunately, what they know isn't really good. Rose says, exactly. Lana says, part 2 is needed. Nikki says, everyone must be held accountable. Just because you were raised a certain way doesn't mean you have to stay and act that way. It's all about person's choice. It's all about that person's choice to change for the better or use that just as a crutch. We are sometimes their second mom, says Latifa. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Nikki, but the problem is they don't even know to do better. Sometimes they don't, I'm not trying to make excuses for them, but sometimes I don't think they even know how to do better. Look, I agree. Ultimately, at the end of the day, and I spoke about this at my conference, it was one of the topics I spoke on, accountability and responsibility. At a certain point, we have to stop blaming people for our behavior. I completely agree with that. When you become an adult and your father did this or didn't do this, or your mother did that or didn't do that, we really can't hold it as a crutch or an excuse to behave a certain way. We really can't. At a certain point, it's up to us to say, what happened to us sucked. It was really bad, wasn't fair, but I'm an adult now. I have to do better because I know better. I understand that, and I completely agree with that. But I do have a little bit of understanding for those that say, I didn't have that growing up. I don't know what that looked like. Nobody ever held me, hugged me, told me they loved me. My father was never around. I have a little bit of understanding about that as well. Not enough to use it as a crutch, though. We are oftentimes their mothers. Oftentimes we become their second mothers. Yeah. Wow, this was so good. You have to sometimes create it in your own life, in your own current life. That you have, yes, you do have to create that example. I know what you mean, Latifa. You have to create that example for yourself. You've got to break the curse, and you got to do better. Especially if you know and you see and you're being told that it's hurting people, at what point do you stop and do better? Ooh, this was good. I'm really emotional. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. It affects every single female in my family. So it's a tough one for me. It's a real tough one for me. I unfortunately have to end it here. So that's Shireen can go on to her next live. But thank you all for your comments, for your participation. This was great. I knew it was going to be great. If there's more comments coming in afterwards, then I'll do a part 2 in 2 weeks. If you're on YouTube right now, watching this on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe before you end your live. And when you subscribe, please make sure you click all notifications so that you can get all the notifications every time a new live drops, every time a new video drops, you'll know. Thank you, 𝗚𝗢. Great show. Thank you very much, Nikki. I really appreciated your comments. God's healing and blessings. Thanks, sis. Love you. And thanks, Nikki. Thanks, Rose. Thanks, Tifa, Sharon, Stephanie. If I missed anybody else, I'm sorry. So remember, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, on Facebook. Just make sure that you have all of my platforms so that you don't miss anything. And as you know, I'm a life coach. This is what I do. This is God's calling on my life. This is what I enjoy doing. It brings me so much peace and joy and happiness. So if you're looking for a life coach, if you're looking for a motivational life coach to help you get to that next level, you might need some motivation in your life, some encouragement, some empowerment, to be inspired, supported, lifted up, please reach out to me on my website. Go to my website at www.olumiili.com. Go to the calendar, book a free 30-minute consultation with me. we'll meet and we'll talk and we'll see how I can best help you as a coach. Alternatively, feel free to email me at info@owlamealy.com and just requesting for a 30-minute consultation with me. Thanks for joining me tonight. It was my pleasure and honor being here. Great discussion. Looking forward to a part 2. If there's enough engagement, we'll do it again. Have a good night, everybody. God bless and be well.